Assassin's note was folded inside a room service envelope and addressed to the most feared man in Chicago. I read the first 3 lines and realized 2 things. Luca Moretti would be dead before midnight. My employee number had already been written beside his body. At 11:14 that Friday night, the lobby of the Belladonna Grand was crowded with politicians, actors, wealthy donors. I'd men who wore black suits as if they had been born inside them. Crystal chandeliers burned above the marble floor. A string quartet played near the ballroom doors outside. Rain turned the city lights into long silver streaks across the windows. I stood behind the reception desk in a navy uniform that pulled too tightly across my stomach because the hotel manager refused to order my correct size. It was Olivia Hayes, though most of the staff called me Liv, when they were kind and Big O, when they believed I could not hear them. That evening, kindness was in short supply, and not to lean on the desk. Assistant manager Marissa Cole whispered as she passed me, "The donors can see everything." Her eyes moved over my body with practiced disappointment. 2 bellmen laughed beneath their breath. I smiled as if I had not heard them, and continued sorting VIP envelopes. I had learned that people became careless around women they considered embarrassing, spoke freely, left keys exposed, and handed over secrets without remembering the clerk behind the counter had a name. The Belladonna belonged to Luca Moretti through a chain of companies nobody mentioned in public. At 38, Luca controlled shipping contracts, nightclubs, construction firms, and an organization federal investigators had tried to dismantle for years. Newspapers called him a businessman. Men entering the private elevator called him Don. Moretti, the charity gal upstairs, honored his late mother and raised money for children's hospitals. It also placed every Moretti captain and half the city's political influence under one roof. Security had searched every employee twice. I was searched 3 times because Marissa said my body could conceal more than other people's. I wanted to quit before my shift started. Arrived. A man wearing a grey courier jacket placed the envelope on the desk and said, "Room 196. Mr. Moretti's hand only. He kept his face lowered beneath a wet cap. I could ask. For a signature, a group of guests crossed between us. When they passed, the courier was gone. The envelope carried the hotel's gold crest, but the paper felt wrong. Belladonna stationery was thick cotton stock. This was thinner and slightly brittle, like paper stored for years. The room number bothered me more. The Belladonna did not have a room 196. The 19th floor ended at suite 194 because the western side contained the old service chapel. "Put it in the VIP box," Marissa ordered, and stop staring at it. I turned the envelope over. It had not been sealed. A faint black mark appeared beneath the fold, the same mark my father once used to indicate urgent building hazards on hotel plans. He had served as the Belladonna's chief engineer until he died in an elevator accident. 12 years earlier, I opened the envelope. Inside was one sheet covered in handwritten Italian. My grandmother came from Palermo and raised me after my father died. She taught me Italian by making me translate recipes, prayers, and the angry letters she never mailed. The note used Sicilian phrases older than anything taught in school. White bell, silver tray. Westlift sleeps at 11:47. The wolf drinks only after the clerk falls. Employee 0719 opens the chapel door. No witnesses after the mother's song. IE number was 719. I read the note twice. Then the ballroom orchestra began rehearsing Conte Partiro, the song Luca Moretti's mother reportedly loved, the Mother-S song. I said, "We need to contact Mr. Moretti's security team." She glanced at the note and rolled her eyes. "You opened private correspondence. It describes an assassination." The bellman snorted. "In Italian? Yes. Maybe it says the buffet is closed." The other laughed. Marissa took the paper from me. She did not speak Italian, but the sight of my number changed her face for a second. Folded it. "You have created enough drama. Return to the desk. There is no room 196. The west elevator is mentioned, and the old chapel is behind that wall. There is no chapel. Mother." It was sealed during the renovation. Her mouth tightened. Marissa had worked at the Belladonna for 6 years. I had worked there for 8, and spent half my childhood following my father through its service corridors. She hated being reminded that the Chubby Clerk knew the building better than management did. "Mr. Moretti's security will not be disturbed because you translated a prank," she said. "Another word, I will suspend you." She placed the note in her jacket pocket and walked toward the ballroom. I reached for the security telephone. A hand closed over mine. Hotel Security Director Calvin Drake stood beside me. He was tall, clean-shaven, and always smelled faintly of cedar. "Marissa says you opened a guest letter. The letter says Luca Moretti will be attacked at midnight. Did it use his name? It calls him the Wolf. Then it could mean anyone. It mentions his mother's song and my employee number." Calvin studied me without surprise. That frightened me. I would have shown disbelief, concern, or amusement. His expression was already prepared. "Give me your access card," he said. "Why? You are suspended pending investigation." "My card opens the chapel." "There is no chapel," he repeated Marissa's exact words. 2 guards appeared behind him. Guests turned to watch. Marissa returned and raised her voice so everyone nearby could hear. "We have discussed inappropriate attention-seeking before." Heat rose beneath my collar. "I am trying to prevent a murder," a woman in diamonds whispered to her friend. "Is that the clerk who keeps stealing desserts?" I had never stolen food from the hotel, but laughter moved through the lobby anyway. Calvin removed my access badge himself, escort her to the staff office. I looked toward the private elevator. Luke Moretti stepped into the lobby with 6 men around him. He was taller than he appeared in photographs, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and dressed in a tuxedo cut so perfectly it seemed part of his posture. Conversation softened. When he passed, he stopped beside an elderly donor, kissed her cheek, and listened while she spoke. Nothing in his manner suggested that men were afraid of him. It made the fear more convincing. "Mr. Moretti," I called. Every head turned. Calvin gripped my arm. "Enough." Luca looked across the lobby at me. Marissa's face went white. "The west elevator will shut down at 11:47. Noted. "Do not drink from the silver tray after the orchestra plays your Mother-S song." Luca's guards moved instantly. 2 surrounded him. Another came toward me. Guests stepped backward, white and frightened. Luca crossed the lobby at an unhurried pace. "Your name?" he asked. "Olivia Hayes." "Employee 0719, Marissa spoke quickly. "Sir," she opened a private envelope and became confused. I removing her. Luca looked at Calvin, hand around my arm. "Release her." Calvin obeyed. Luca held out his hand the envelope. Marissa gave it to him. He unfolded the note and read. Italian was fluent. His eyes changed at the 4th line. "Who delivered this?" "A man in a grey courier jacket. About 5'10". He favored his right leg, and the jacket was dry beneath the shoulders, even though he came through the rain." As men looked at me. "Meaning?" "He did not come from outside. Someone wet the jacket near the entrance." Luca read the note again. "Why did you open it?" "The paper carried my father's old hazard mark. My number does not exist." Calvin said, "Sir, we should move this conversation upstairs." "No," Luca replied. "First, explain why your security director removed the only employee who understood the warning." Jaw tightened. She could have written it. Then removing her access card would complete the instruction. Luca turned to me. "What opens the chapel door?" "Old staff cards with engineering authorization." I had it, because the front desk night clerk must reach the fire controls during emergencies. Who knew that? Human resources, management, security, and anyone who studied the old access list. Anna gave the note to his consigliere, Marco Santini. "Lock the building. No one leaves. Find the courier." Marissa protested that 500 guests would panic. Luca looked at her. "Champagne and call it weather." He told me to come with him. Calvin stepped forward. "She remains a security risk." Luca's voice became soft. "So do you." We entered the private elevator with Marco and 2 guards. I pressed 19. "The west lift?" I asked. "This is the east. There are 3 east elevators. This is the only one no hotel employee controls." The doors closed for the first time since reading the note. Hands began to shake. Luca noticed. Are you afraid of elevators? My father died in one. At this hotel? The West Service elevator fell 8 floors during the renovation. Marco looked at Luca, and unspoken passed between them. What? I asked. Luca answered carefully. The renovation was managed by my uncle, Salvatore Moretti. Salvatore was honorary chairman of the foundation and the man scheduled to introduce Luca at midnight. I had seen him arrive 2 hours earlier, wearing a white dinner jacket and walking with a silver cane. Did the accident happen near the old chapel? Lutuca asked. Yes, my father said somebody was removing fire barriers without permits, and to report it. The next morning, the elevator reached 19. The corridor was quiet and empty. At the western end, decorative paneling covered the former chapel entrance. Mother had shown me the door when I was 10. During Prohibition, hotel owners used the chapel to hide liquor and people. Later, the Morettis used it for private meetings. Official plans showed a solid wall. I pressed my palm against the carved wood and found the tiny brass rose marking the latch. My badge would release the magnetic seal, I said. Marco tried his MasterCard. Red light. Access restricted, he said. Luca called security control. No answer. At 11:32, every hotel security channel had gone silent. The note says employee 079 opens the door. They expected you to bring me here or force me to do it. Why? Luca asked. Because whoever is behind the wall needs my access recorded on the system. Marco examined the panel. I open it manually. From the engineering room below. But the passage may be trapped. A sound came through the wall. 3 faint knocks, then 2, then 3 again. My father used that pattern when working in noisy machinery rooms. A hazard. Someone is inside, I said. Luca put one hand against the panel, or someone wants us to believe that. He sent a guard to retrieve the mechanical release. I knelt near the baseboard. A fine silver wire crossed the gap beneath the door. It connected to a pressure switch on the other side. Opening the panel would trigger something. The release, I warned. Marco shone a light. Can you disable it if I can reach the electrical cabinet in the West Service stair, the one beside the elevator that falls at 11:47? Asked. Yes, convenient. We took the emergency stairs down to 18. The service corridor smelled of dust and hot metal. My father's old diagrams returned to me as if I had walked there yesterday. I shoot to the left. Mechanical room behind the blue door, a narrow passage leading beneath the ballroom stage. The Belladonna was less a building than a body, and my father had taught me where it breathed. Electrical cabinet, the lock had been replaced. Lucas guard prepared to break it. Wait, a black fingerprint covered one screw. Fresh grease. I removed a hairpin and released the old hinge pin instead of the lock. It swung outward. Inside, a small digital timer counted down from 12 minutes. It connected the west elevator brake, chapel pressure switch, ballroom ventilation, and fire alarm override. 4 systems that should never share a circuit had been tied together. At 11:47 the west elevator stops, I said. Opening the chapel completes the circuit. At midnight, carries something into the ballroom. Marco photographed the wires. Can you stop it? Cutting the wrong line could trigger everything. Luca looked at the timer. Who can? Mother could. And you? Everyone stared at me. All my life people assumed that because I worked behind a desk, I had failed to inherit his skill. The truth was less simple. At death, I studied electrical engineering for 2 years, but left college when my grandmother became ill. The Belladonna job paid her medical bills. I kept telling myself I would return, and year became 8. I know enough to isolate the elevator and ventilation, I said. Not enough to promise the device will remain safe. I do not require promises, Luca replied. The best decision available. It was the first time that night anyone treated my knowledge as something other than an inconvenience. I traced the newer wires. The assassin used black for live, neutral, and red for triggers. Too neat. My father taught me that deliberate sabotage often created a visible logic to lure technicians into following it. I checked the grounding rail. A thin green wire had been painted copper. That was the real trigger. I disconnected power upstream, bridged the fire alarm with an emergency battery, then removed the green wire. Timer stopped at 11 minutes and 6 seconds. No explosion, no gas, no falling elevator. Marco exhaled. Luca did not move. "We are not safe," I said. "The note gives several instructions. Ice may only be one layer." At that moment, the west elevator bell rang. According to the panel, it had no power. The doors opened at the end of the corridor. A silver room service cart rolled out by itself, and stood one champagne glass and a black telephone. The phone rang. Marco drew his weapon. Luca answered on speaker. A distorted voice spoke in Italian. The clerk was supposed to fall before the wolf learned to listen. I glanced at me. "Who are you?" "The man returning what your father stole. My father is dead." "Not dead enough." The phone went silent. Beneath the champagne glass lay a photograph of Lucas, father standing in the old chapel with my father and Salvatore Moretti. The date was 1 week before the elevator accident. Father held a rolled blueprint. Lucas' father held an envelope. Salvatore watched from the doorway. On the back, someone had written, "3 men built the tomb. 1 son will open it." "Father Steele?" Luca asked. I studied the image. The blueprint S corner showed my father S numbering system. "That is not a hotel plan. It is a vault ventilation diagram." Marco turned the photograph toward the light. The Moretti Reserve was once kept beneath the chapel. Lucas' father moved it after a rival attack. The old vault was supposedly empty. If the assassin believed something remained inside, the Geiler could be a distraction from theft. We returned to the chapel door. With the trigger disabled, the guard activated the manual release. Opened 6 inches and stopped against something heavy. A man lay behind it. Calvin Drake's deputy, Aaron Wells, was unconscious with his hands tied. His access badge had been taped to the pressure switch, and the knocks had been his foot, striking the wall. We pulled him out. He regained consciousness long enough to say, Calvin attacked him in security control. "Marissa?" I asked. She saw him change the access list and whispered. She tried to call Moretti security. My shame sharpened. Marissa had mocked and dismissed me, but perhaps her return to the lobby had been an attempt to deliver the note. Calvin intercepted her. "Where is she?" Luca called the front desk. No answer. Then my phone vibrated. A text from Marissa's number contained a photograph of her tied to a chair inside room 1906. Possible room. Behind her stood the original hotel switchboard, removed from service decades ago. Room 1906 was not a guest room. It was an old engineering code for the hidden communications chamber above the chapel. Final text said, "Bring 719 and the wolf." No guards, I showed Luca. "It is a trap," Marco said. "Yes," Luca replied, "but traps reveal what the hunter needs." Marco to secure the ballroom and move guests away from ventilation zones without announcing danger. "You are not going alone," Marco said. "I will have Olivia." Marco stared at him. "A hotel clerk. Tonight." That has been more useful than my entire security department. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt the weight of Marissa's frightened face on the phone. "She treated me badly," I said after Marco left. "That does not mean she deserves to die." Lucas' eyes rested on me. "No, it means saving someone does not require pretending they were kind." We entered the communications chamber through a narrow staircase hidden behind the linen room. Luca left his jacket and visible weapon with Marco, but I saw another pistol at his ankle, carried the courier envelope and my father's photograph. At the top, a steel door stood open. The chamber beyond contained antique switchboards, dusty cables, and new surveillance monitors showing the ballroom from every angle. I sat tied beneath one screen. Calvin stood behind her with a gun. Salvatore Moretti sat comfortably in a chair beside the old operator console. His silver cane rested across his knees. He said, "You always were more curious than your father." Luca's face revealed nothing. "Release the woman." Salvatore looked at me. "Which one?" "Both." Calvin laughed. The big clerk came willingly. "I told you she would." The insult did not hurt the way it had in the lobby. Fear had burned away the need to be approved by small men. "You put my employee number in the note," I said. The access log, to blame me for opening the chapel. and for disabling the fire alarm before 500 guests died, Calvin replied. A lonely clerk with debts, an unfinished engineering degree, and went toward the hotel that killed her father. It was almost elegant. Almost, I said, Salvatore's eyes narrowed. Where is the blueprint? What blueprint? Your father took the original vault plan before he died. Mother paid him to hide it. We searched his house, his car, and the elevator shaft. He left it to you. I remembered my grandmother's old recipe book, filled with diagrams I assumed were measurements for large catering ovens. Translate every Italian note in its margins. One phrase repeated beside a drawing of a rose. What the wolf guards the baker carries. The blueprint had been hidden in plain sight as a recipe. 12 years, searching for something my grandmother kept beside flour, I said. Salvatore's cane struck the floor. Where is it? Luca watched my expression and understood that I knew. Not getting it, he said. Salvatore smiled. Then everyone downstairs inhales what is already inside the vents. We disabled the device, I replied. One device. Calvin lifted a remote. 3 reservoirs. Your father designed the ventilation too well. Every table receives the same dose. Luca's Mother-S song began in the ballroom below. Midnight approached. I release poison. You die with us, Luca said. Salvatore tapped his cane. This room has independent air. I looked at the old switchboard. My father had shown me how the chamber's air system worked. As it drew fresh air through a roof pipe and exhausted into the chapel. But the dust on the vent grill moved inward, not outward. The system had been reversed. Salvatore and Calvin believed the room protected them. It would pull ballroom air inside first. Why would my father reverse it? Because he expected someone to use the chamber as a safe room during an attack. He had built a trap for the people controlling the vents. Are not connected to the ballroom, I said. Calvin's thumb paused. You are lying. The modern ducts connect here. My father reversed the chamber flow before he died. Press that remote. This room receives the highest concentration. Salvatore looked toward the grill. Doubt crossed his face. Calvin raised his gun toward me. She is bluffing, I said. I said he did not. That hesitation told Luca everything. He moved first, kicking the cane from Salvatore's hands and pulling Marissa's chair sideways as Calvin fired. It struck the switchboard. Sparks exploded. Lights failed. In darkness, I dropped behind the operator desk and crawled toward Marissa. Calvin fired again. Luca returned. One shot and fell, but I could not see who. My fingers found Marissa's wrists. The rope was secured with plastic ties. I used a broken metal switch from the floor to cut them. I am sorry. Later, I said. Can you walk? My ankle. We crawled toward the stair door. A red emergency light flickered on. Calvin lay beside the wall, holding his shoulder. Luca had Salvatore pinned against the console. Smoke began pouring from the damaged switchboard. The bullet had ignited old wire insulation. Fire climbed the wall toward the sealed ventilation reservoirs. We need to leave now, shouted. Salvatore laughed from beneath Luca's arm. The door locked when the alarm failed. I tried the steel handle. It would not move. The chamber had become the tomb described in the note. Mother died, trying to stop Salvatore from removing fire barriers. Now the same illegal modifications trapped us. On the wall above the switchboard was a brass speaking tube once used to communicate with the kitchen. I pulled off its cover. The shaft was too narrow for a person, but air moved through it. The kitchen hears this, I said. I shouted into the tube. No answer. The orchestra below grew louder and filled the ceiling. Marissa began coughing. Luca released Salvatore long enough to strike the door with Calvin. S fallen gun steel bent but held. I looked at the old operator plugs. Some lines still carried labels. Ballroom, kitchen, engineering, roof. The damaged board had power in one corner. If I could connect the speaking circuit to the ballroom amplifier, I could send a warning. I plugged the kitchen line into the main announcement. Jack, static burst from a small monitor. This is Olivia Hayes at the front desk. I shouted into the brass tube. Evacuate the west ballroom through the garden doors. Do not use elevators. Fire in the 19th floor service chamber. For a second, only the orchestra answered. Then Marco's voice came through. Are you? Downstairs music stopped. Guests began moving. Now get us out, Luca said. Working on it, Marco replied. Fire spread across the ceiling. The only possible exit was the roof air duct above us, wider than the speaking tube, but covered by a bolted grate. Luca shot the bolts. The grate fell. Olivia first, he ordered. Marissa first. Her ankle is injured. He lifted Marissa into the opening. Through the narrow metal shaft. Calvin groaned from the floor. Luca looked at him. Leave him, Salvatore said. He failed. Luca dragged Calvin beneath the vent anyway, and dies before answering questions. We pushed Calvin into the duct after Marissa. Salvatore refused to move. My empire should have been mine, he said. Your father took it because he was the eldest. Seized his collar. This was never an empire. It was a room where frightened men kept locking the next generation. He forced Salvatore into the shaft. Smoke made my eyes stream. I held out his hands to lift me. The duct is narrow, I said. I had spent my life measuring my body against chairs, uniforms, turnstiles, and other people's amusement. The opening looked barely wider than my shoulders. Calvin's voice echoed from inside. She will never fit. Even wounded, he found pleasure in it. Luca looked at the smoke, then at me. Olivia, look at me. I did. It is steel. It does not have an opinion about your body. Turn your left shoulder, exhale, and move. I raised my arms, turned, and pulled myself inside. The metal pressed against my hips. I moved. Not gracefully, not easily. I moved anyway. Luca followed behind me as fire consumed the chamber. The duct rose toward the roof, then divided. Marissa shouted that the left branch was blocked. I remembered the recipe diagram. What the wolf guards, the baker carries. The baker shaft went right toward the old pastry kitchen, where bread once cooled before banquets. Right, I called. Take the right branch. The shaft sloped downward. One by one, we slid through decades of dust and crashed onto flour sacks in the abandoned pastry room. Marco's men broke through the corridor door seconds later. The ballroom had been evacuated. Fire crews reached the 19th floor. No poison entered the vents because I had been right. The reservoirs were connected to the chamber, not the ballroom. Salvatore had built his plan around incomplete blueprints. My father's final modification saved everyone 12 years after they killed him. Calvin survived and began talking before surgery ended. He had worked for Salvatore for 9 years, planting staff, copying security credentials, and moving money through hotel renovation accounts. Marissa discovered altered access lists that afternoon, and she tried to warn Luca security, but Calvin intercepted her. She took the note from me because she planned to carry it into the ballroom herself, believing Salvatore would not suspect her. I should have trusted you, she said from a hospital bed the next morning. Her ankle was broken and smoke had damaged her throat. Yes, I replied. She looked surprised. I thought you would say it was understandable. I mocked you because the staff listened to you more than me. You knew the hotel, and I only knew how to make people afraid of losing their jobs. That is also true. Ours filled her eyes. I am sorry, I did not forgive her immediately. An apology is not a command, but I believed she finally understood what she had done. Salvatore's arrest exposed the reason my father died. He discovered that Salvatore was converting the hidden chapel into a private chemical storage room while stealing from the Moretti Reserve. Luca's father paid my father to document the violations, but delayed acting because public scandal threatened the family. Salvatore sabotaged the elevator before the evidence could be released. Luca's father spent years searching for the missing blueprint while pretending the death was an accident. Father failed yours. Luca told me in the empty ballroom after investigators left. Broken glass covered the floor. Half the flowers had been trampled during evacuation. Dawn colored the windows pale blue. To help too late. That seems common in powerful families. It ends with me, does it? He accepted the challenge in my voice. You should not believe me because I say it. Then watch what I do. Luca released every renovation record to investigators, including documents that implicated his father. The Moretti companies paid compensation to my family and 3 workers injured in related projects. closed the hidden chapel, and converted it into a memorial archive for hotel employees whose injuries had been concealed. He also fired the executive board that approved Marissa's uniform policy. Covered that part when a tailor arrived at my apartment with fabric samples. "Mr. Moretti ordered a new uniform," she said, "in your correct size and whatever design you choose." I called Luca. "You sent a tailor to my home? The hotel failed to provide appropriate clothing. That does not give you permission to dress me." Silence. Then he said, "You are right." I left. The next day, Luca sent the hotel a uniform budget and told every employee to select their own size and approved style. No private fitting, no special treatment. That was the first proof he might actually learn. I returned to the Belladonna 1 week later, not as a clerk. Luca offered me director of building safety. I refused because I had not completed my engineering degree, and to create a ceremonial title. I refused that too. Finally, we agreed that I would serve as paid operations advisor while the company funded my return to university, a requirement that I remain afterward. "You negotiate like an attorney," Marco said. "I spent 8 years explaining cancellation policies to wedding parties," I replied. "Attorneys are easier, as change was simple. Every hotel employee, from housekeepers to bell staff, could stop an event over a safety concern without management retaliation. Calvin's system had concentrated authority and security. Mine distributed attention among people who actually knew what normal looked like. A dishwasher identified an unfamiliar maintenance uniform. A laundry worker found a copied master key. A banquet server noticed a guest photographing emergency exits. None of the incidents became an assassination because ordinary workers were finally allowed to speak before danger became dramatic. I returned after recovering and accepted a lower position in event coordination. Some staff wanted me to have her fired. I did not protect her from consequences, but I did not need revenge to prove I had mattered. I apologized publicly for the body-based insults and changed the employee evaluation system she had used to punish anyone who did not fit the hotel's polished image. Trust returned slowly. It was appropriate. Luca began appearing at my evening engineering classes in ways he pretended were accidental. Once, his car happened to be outside during a storm. Another time, to bring coffee for the entire study group. "Mafia bosses often attend VAC lectures," I asked. "Only the dangerous ones. The lecture is about pressure differentials. To save my life." "You are romanticizing ventilation. I have been accused of worse." "The attraction between us did not begin when he pulled me through a burning duct." "It began when he admitted the tailor was a mistake without turning the apology into an excuse. It grew when he listened to hotel workers, when he released records that damaged his family's legend, asked questions without assuming money entitled him to the answer." 6 months after the gala, the Belladonna held another charity event. This one honored the hotel staff. A chapel archive opened publicly. My father's blueprint hung behind glass beside the assassin's note. Investigators had found the recipe book in my grandmother's storage box. Her coded drawings proved every safety modification my father made. At the ceremony, Luca invited me to the stage. I almost refused because I remembered the laughter from the lobby. Housekeepers, engineers, clerks, cooks, and bell staff in the front rows. I walked forward. "Everyone calls this the night Olivia Hayes saved the Mafia boss," Luca told the room. Incomplete. "She saved 500 guests. 2 people who had mistreated her, 1 man who tried to frame her, and a hotel that never respected the knowledge behind its own desk." Calvin was awaiting trial. Salvatore would spend the rest of his life in prison. Luca could have described punishment. Instead, he described the people who survived. He handed me the first Employee Safety Award bearing my father's name. I looked at the audience. The 2 bellmen who laughed at me stood near the back. They did not meet my eyes. "My father taught me that buildings speak before they fail," I said. "A wire becomes warm. Ours begins sticking. Air moves in the wrong direction. Peoples do the same. They warn us when something is wrong. The danger begins when power decides certain voices are too ordinary, or too embarrassing to hear." No one laughed. After the event, I returned to the reception desk. A new clerk stood there in a wheelchair, explaining to a guest why the accessible elevator could not be blocked by luggage. Demanded a manager. Marissa arrived and moved the luggage herself. Progress did not always look like a speech. Sometimes it looked like the person who once humiliated you enforcing the rule she used to ignore, on me near the ballroom doors. "Dinner," he asked. "Is that a request or an order?" "A request." No private restaurant agreed. No buying the building if I dislike the table. And once, you bought the landlord's debt. Technically different. Luca. No buying anything. We ate at my grandmother's favorite Italian restaurant. He spoke Italian to the owner, corrected his Sicilian pronunciation. He claimed his dialect was aristocratic. I told him his grandmother would be ashamed. He laughed in a way I had never heard inside the hotel, not checking who watched him. Near dessert, he placed the assassiness original room service envelope on the table inside a protective sleeve. "I thought this belonged to the archive," I said. "The note does. This was inside the lining." He opened a hidden fold I had missed. My father's handwriting appeared in faded pencil. "If this mark is found, trust the person who notices the room that does not exist." Father had placed the envelope in the old chapel years earlier as part of his evidence. Salvatore found it and used it for the assassination note, never noticing the message inside the lining. My employee number because he believed I was the perfect person to frame, overlooked, mocked, and easy to describe as resentful. He did not know my father had prepared for someone exactly like him. The faded words. He knew I might work here. He knew whoever truly understood the hotel would question room. 1906. Luca covered my hand with his, then waited. I turned my palm beneath his and held on. And they had all believed the Chubby Clerk was the least important woman in the Belladonna Grand. Marissa believed my body made the hotel look less elegant. Calvin believed it made me easy to blame. Salvatore believed I would crawl into the background and stay there even. I had begun believing that unfinished dreams could become a permanent life if enough years passed. Sin's note landed on my desk because people with power rarely see the person receiving their messages. I read the language they assumed I would not understand. I recognized the room they believed had been erased. I remembered the building they thought belonged only to them at midnight, when the most feared man in Chicago needed someone he could trust. Guns, money, and a famous name were not enough. He needed the clerk everyone had trained themselves not to see, and this time when I spoke, the entire hotel listened.